News, weather, travel and sport.
And mornings with Ian Collins.
BBC Radio Kent.
It's all here.
It is indeed. Yes, good morning, everybody. 11:05. It's BBC Radio Kent with Ian Collins. We are live at the Gulbenkian Theatre in Canterbury. We've been here throughout the course of the morning. Some fabulous debate and comment on the world of arts. We continue in that vein. Plus, of course, being a Friday, it is our BBC Radio Kent news panel. This is where we look back at those big stories that have essentially dominated the news agenda, in particular the BBC Radio Kent news agenda over the last 7 days. To do that, we invite two fabulous guests to join us around the table to have a chat about all of that and debate some of those issues. So we'll meet our guests and we'll bring you story number one in just a couple of moments' time.
The News Panel with Ian Collins on BBC Radio Kent.
BBC Radio Kent, 8 minutes after 11 o'clock. It's a Friday morning. We take you into the weekend in fine form, of course, with the BBC Radio Kent news panel. We'll meet our two guests in a couple of moments. They'll be helping us look back at the big issues of the last 7 days. Before we do, let's remind ourselves of some of the big stories.
A former UKIP councillor in Thanet who was expelled for making what the party's leader Nigel Farage awards have been presented at the O2 Arena.
Very good. I feel like no one can say a bad word against that because we are even, which is good.
Just a taster of what we're going to be talking about. Let's meet our panel. Murray Evans, Press Officer for Kent County Council, is with us. Murray, good morning.
Morning, Ian. How you doing?
Nice to see you again. The last time we locked horns was at the Kent County show, of course.
Locked horns? That sounds a bit serious.
It does a bit, doesn't it? Makes it sound like we had a fallout or
I don't
something.
think we did.
It was all very amicable, as I remember. You can't fall out with a man in a bow tie.
Exactly. Thank you.
It's impossible. Welcome to the Gulbenkian Theatre, Murray.
That's right.
And for those who are unaware of the work, obviously our job here on BBC Radio Kent is to talk about the goings-on in Kent. Kent County Council Press Office, what does that involve on a day-to-day basis? What's a typical day?
Ooh. Sorry, I don't want to defer too much on this. So my responsibility is principally around education, trading standards, sport, culture, libraries.
Well,
but there's various of us in there,
so
and
it's
a lot going on, and it's a case of taking calls from the media and pumping out positive press releases and answering queries and crises.
Yes, which is usually us calling you, saying, "Can you shine some light on this,
quite
please?"
Frequently,
quite frequently indeed. Nathalie Banaigs is the founder and director of Kent Creative Arts. Nathalie, good morning to you.
Good morning.
Nice to have you with us. You are obviously passionate about the arts.
Yeah, although
So much so you brought it from Paris to Kent.
Yes, I was practicing that in Paris as well.
As well, indeed. Yes.
No.
Tell us a little bit more about your job and background.
Yes, okay. I run an art organization called Kent Creative Arts. What we do is about encouraging and promoting creativity in Kent. There are, as you know, a lot of talented people there. We also try to promote the art, not the art themselves, but what it can do for people in everyday life and using it for learning, for well-being, happiness, etc., which, as was discussed before, has a massive impact.
It's the missing element, isn't it? It's not talked about enough, perhaps.
Well, creativity is a set of mind first, and it's being innovative and thinking outside the box and all that. Making art is a consequence of that. But before that, there are lots of things people can benefit from. So we run community projects where people can use art to express themselves, share their views, learn about their heritage, the place in which they live, etc. And there's kind of the biggest project we run at the moment is Kent Creative Live, which is a group for artists and creative people where we encourage entrepreneurship.
Okay.
So people learn how to become more financially sustainable and resilient in times
which
where...
might surprise people that you're involved in that side of things as well.
Well, I think everybody, including artists, probably even more artists, they need to earn a living.
Sure.
And grants now are about to become almost a thing of the past, really. So I think it's time for people to learn how to take care of their destiny. And
it's funny you say that. I was having a conversation with some friends who are stand-up comedians, and I don't want to generalise here, but most stand-up comedians politically are usually to the left, and yet their entire existence depends on the economic argument that comes from the right, which is rather interesting. I know that's less and less the case, but you take the point if you look in stereotypical forms. You know, you've got to look after yourself, you've got to know where you're going, you've got to have a plan, you've got to have a structure, you've got to have organisation behind it. So it's all very well pumping out gags on stage. You've got to know what your bank manager needs as well.
Yeah, exactly. You need to know where you're going and how to get there. And what we do is mainly through getting people to grow their network and build relationships with people they work with, and then to learn about how to do it, a marketing plan and all that. It's some kind of business, although the word kind of puts creative people off. Yeah. But if you want to earn a living doing what you like and what is important to you, it's a good.
Because it's often seen that one is kind of against the other in a weird kind of way. You know, if you're an artist, you don't care about business. In fact, you almost loathe the very idea of being seen as anyone connected to business, because your art is a freedom from the conventions of society.
You can be, but that's even better if you deal with it yourself.
Sure.
Then, yeah.
Indeed.
But there are different profiles, and some people do want to make their creative practice work for themselves financially. So they come to us to get the support and the encouragement. And those who don't want to, it's a choice. You know.
Well, Nathalie and Murray are very welcome on our news panel. Lots of stories to get through. So we'll start with our first story, a documentary showing former UKIP member Roseanne Duncan making what are being described as deeply racist comments was aired last weekend on BBC Two. The Thanet district councillor has since been expelled from the party, but said she had no regrets and didn't think she was being racist. This is what she said on the programme.
The only people I do have problems with are Negroes. And I don't know why. I don't know whether there's something in my psyche or whether it's karma from a previous life, but I really do have a problem with people with Negroid features. I really do.
Every time we play that clip, I have to say there was a dog panting at the end of it. Because otherwise one is sort of left wondering that as if that wasn't outlandish enough, there seems to be a mystery sound effect on the end. And Murray, I mean, it does seem incredible that when you hear that, if you didn't know better, you would just kind of assume it was a group of comedians who were trying to parody a type of person that once was. But in fact, that was very real, and it was somebody who's an elected representative.
It reminded me of the days of Alf Garnett.
Sure.
And the TV program.
Yeah, it's got that feel about it.
It was one of the most bizarre things I've seen on television in a long time. To be fair, I didn't see the programme as it went out, because I was probably doing something more important. But having read the headlines the following day, just had to have a look, to
see what it was all about.
And you're right, it was just totally bizarre.
Was it so, Nathalie, was it so ridiculous, what she said, that it almost became, it almost bordered on the humorous, because it was so ridiculous, it could not possibly be, it almost went beyond offence, and then kind of back round on itself and came from another direction?
When I heard the report, I had to check to make sure it actually happened.
Sure.
But it's the obviously wrong use of the wrong language and vocabulary. But what I found amazing is that she didn't seem to have realised that she did anything wrong or used the wrong word. That's to say it. And also the camera was there filming, and presumably she was aware of it. So I'm a bit puzzled.
I think the context that was given to the first part, because I think this is in two sections. The first is the use of the word Negro, which, as somebody called us in the week and said, once upon a time, probably in the 50s or the 60s, it was a word that was used to be polite. It was a word that was used in order to find a unifying word that could describe a race of people. And she's clearly of that issue, but I don't think what she says in the use of that word is the big issue. It's the fact that she doesn't see there's any problem with the fact that she has trouble with black people and has a problem with their features.
Yeah, but I think there are different levels, because although the word was okay some time ago, it is not now. So she should know that. And there are words that you don't use there. We know they're offensive.
A couple of other points I made. The first one is, I'm not from Thanet, but I'm not sure that black people is an issue in Thanet. People have an issue with incomers, immigrants into into Thanet, they tend to be mostly for Eastern European
Yeah.
and possibly some Asian. I'm not sure black is an issue in Thanet anyway.
No, I don't-
specifically.
yeah.
That's one.
I
that's
don't
one
think
thing.
it
And
is.
the other point I want to make is that without Mrs. Duncan's outburst, not outburst, but the things that she said, I'm not sure where that programme would have gone. It wouldn't have attracted anywhere near as much as
Well, there
without
is-
it. What was
yeah.
left?
I mean,
Not
I think
a
there
lot,
were one or
really.
two other things she said that were perhaps also a little.
Can I also say that
mischievous as well.
if they had a more experienced press officer, it might not have happened.
Yes, indeed. And the press officer was interestingly sitting in the room at the time when this was going on, looking a little bit
Not sure.
surrounded, by the way, with ornamental clowns,
Oh, yeah.
which is obviously something they collect. I don't know.
Everyone's got a hobby.
Yeah, I don't know what happened there. But I think maybe, Natalie, what surprised me most about this was simply the casual way she said all of this. She didn't hesitate. It flowed from her lips very easily. She used that word very naturally. And it did, in that respect, to go back to my earlier point, it sounded as if it came from a different era. But this is 2015.
Yes, it is. And I'm afraid it might be the case for many more people
Yeah.
who don't have a camera in front of them. I wouldn't give it too much publicity, to be honest.
Sure.
Something that you can just let go and...
Yeah. Well, it is one of those stories that will disappear. Whether Roseanne Duncan disappears, we will only find out next time the local elections happen, of course. We have Murray and Natalie with us here on the BBC Radio Kent News panel. We'll move on to story 2 in just a few moments' time. Meantime, it's coming up on 21 minutes after 11 o'clock. Let's get the news, weather and travel with Kate. It is BBC Radio Kent, 27 minutes after 11 o'clock. It's the news panel. We have Murray Evans with us. Murray is a press officer for Kent County Council. Also, Nathalie Banaigs, who is the founder and director of Kent Creative Arts. Lots of stories still to get through. And we're going to go to story number 2 now. It was announced this week that one of Kent's oldest companies, Aylesford Newsprint, would be going into administration. The paper has been manufactured on the site since 1922, and more than 230 jobs are being lost. Let's hear from Tim Luckhurst, who's Professor of Journalism at the University of Kent.
Newspaper circulation's been a big decline in the last 15 years, and the truth is we simply don't read newspapers in print as much as we did. We're reading them online, and the consequence of that is that news printed on dead trees is a shrinking business. So the people who turn the trees into paper or turn the paper into newsprint are just not going to do as well as they used to in the past.
It's interesting, Murray, isn't it? Anybody who drives up the M20 will know Aylesford Newsprint, because there it
Big-
is.
big building.
Yes, beaming at you, and has done clearly since 1922. And I remember as a kid, always looking at that building, thinking, what is that place over? What do they do in there? And of course, it's a paper manufacturer. But as was said by Tim in that clip, the reality of the modern age is that people aren't reading newspapers in the same numbers.
That's definitely true.
How do you form an argument against that?
Yeah, exactly. I would have, as an old dyed-in-the-wool newspaper hack, it irks me a lot to see that decline, and the fact that people are relying on online news. And it's also, can I just say, it's a bit of a challenge to KCC press office, in the sense that whereas you knew when newspaper deadlines were, it's like KM comes out on Friday, or they want a story about Wednesday lunchtime, whatever, that's fine.
Yep.
Nowadays, they'll ring you on a Monday and say, come out by 3 o'clock, I want to put it online. So this is, the deadline has become that,
Sure.
everything, it's online first, which is
Yeah.
a bit of a challenge.
And there's no such thing now as there as waking up wondering what the headline's going to be, because you'll have already seen it on Twitter or on Facebook or any other form of digital media.
Exactly.
Where you're able to
I think people do miss out in the sense that if you don't buy a newspaper, there's a lot more in a newspaper that they will never put online. There are hundreds of stories in a newspaper, community news and what's on, and loads and loads of stuff that they haven't got
Sure.
room for online.
It is a sad reality, though, isn't it, Natalie, that, as we move, technology is marvellous, and I know it creates new jobs and new strands and opportunities, and I'm sure the economic arguments are interesting if we got into that. But the reality is, for whatever it does create, there is a human component to it. Self-service tills, Oyster cards, and of course digital media, meaning you don't need newspapers anymore.
Well, I personally like paper because I spend my days in front of a computer, or most of it. So I like sitting on a sofa holding a piece of paper.
Sure.
What also you get in newspapers is more in-depth stories. Okay, as opposed to what I think sometimes, unfortunately, people are getting used to, it's very short bits of information through Twitter.
Sort of bite-sized chunks.
It's very, exactly, just a little bit. But what is good with this is the discussions people are having. So I like the mixture of both is quite interesting.
Yeah,
I read papers, you have a long view over something, and you have all sorts, you can read a full page about something, which you don't really with social media.
I suppose what a newspaper misses, especially if you pick up a broadsheet, is that the moment you open it up, your eye, without you realising it, knows there's a small story down there, there's a bigger one there, there's the main story here, and there's something on the side. And your brain computes that into a little order that you're going to read it in. And you think, in a moment, I'll go and read it, because that'll be a light-hearted one, and this will be more serious. With, I've got an iPad here, that has a copy of today's Times and Telegraph in it, that frankly has so much content, it's ridiculous. There's so much content in there. So all the journalism is there. The photographs look more beautiful than they do in a newspaper because it's a nice, shiny digital photograph. But there is something about the tangible aspect, Murray, of holding a newspaper, as you both alluded to, that is still, it's almost hardwired into us, isn't it?
It is. If you've been brought up with newspaper, working on newspapers, it's been most of your life, then you don't want to see that go anyway. And I agree with Nathalie. I'd rather have something in my hand rather than watch it on the screen and flick through and then pop up adverts. And at least in a newspaper, I hate to say this, but you can ignore the adverts because they're in the bottom corner.
Of course.
But so many of the news sites have got pop-up adverts, which are just irritating.
And of course, with something like this, this is a company, Aylesford Newsprint, that's been there, Nathalie, since 1922. I mean, this is incredible. There's a bit of sort of local history there as well. But there is a reality about technology that, it will, for all that it creates, it also means that what goes with it are job losses, in this case 230.
Yes, but maybe some things can be created from the digital world.
Yeah.
I don't think it's all black and white. You have to use a bit of both, and there is good and bad in both situations. But I'm personally, because I'm quite interested in local heritage, history, etc., it's always sad to see something going. And,
of course.
A way of doing things that is changing so much that it's disappearing. That's 230 people.
230 jobs that we know about at the moment.
That
is a lot of people from that neck of the woods as well.
What I find amazing is the obviously it's a tragedy for the people that are lusing their jobs, but in addition, I'm surprised that it's turned so badly in such a short space of time.
Very quickly,
400,000 tonnes of newsprint a year.
Yeah.
The other thing, to their credit, when they were running, was the fact they weren't just producing newsprint by cutting down trees and making paper. They were actually recycling
as well, which was huge. Yeah. Okay, we're going to take some more music. We're back with more from our panel in just a couple of moments. Murray and Nathalie with us through until midday here on BBC Radio Kent. Coming up on 25 to 12, here's Mark Ronson. BBC Radio Kent, 23 minutes to 12 o'clock. We are live from the Gulbenkian Theatre in Canterbury here on this Friday morning. But the news panel, as you would expect, is still here. We have Nathalie Banaigs, who's the founder and director of Kent Creative Arts. Also, Murray Evans, press officer with Kent County Council. We should also mention, Nathalie, this story, because this is clearly dear to you. A report claiming creativity and arts were being squeezed out of schools. This was a study by Warwick University, said cultural experiences and opportunities were being closed off to youngsters, and there had been significant decline in the number of state schools offering arts subjects taught by specialist teachers. The research revealed that between 2003 and 2013, so over a 10-year period, there was a 50% drop in GCSE entries for design and technology, 23% for drama, and 25% for other craft-related subjects. And it's interesting, Nathalie, that on our debate in the first hour, we talked a lot about that, how the arts is very much reduced as kind of almost a hobby. So it's not that important. You've got maths, you've got English, bit of history, some sciences, but drama and the arts, well, it's not quite the same thing. But we learned this morning that it is still pretty important.
I think it is. Well, obviously, it's the easy way of looking at it is it's more important for people to get food than a cultural event. But the arts, I think it's not just making art, it's what it does for people in their lives. And the purpose of art is probably to question the world and give a view and share your views and expressing yourself. So it is present in everyday life, as they said in the panel a couple of hours ago. Now, the thing is, it starts with having a creative mind, and that's why it's so important that it is in schools. I think at a very young age, we have to get children used to think creatively, and this creative education is helping for the rest of their lives. I think there is evidence that children who take art and creative activities at school are actually better in other subjects as well, and it makes them think outside the box, it makes them more innovative, it leads to all sorts of other things and a very positive change in their behavior. So I think, yes, it is very important. And then when it is about making art or creating a cultural event, it helps people entertain themselves, it helps them express themselves, as I said, but it's also a very good tool to learn, to get close to your community, to get together. It has an economic impact on the local economy. I mean, the impact is absolutely massive, and we must start early at school, definitely. So it's a bit of a bad news.
If we're seeing a drop in these kind of things.
Yes, I think it's going to have dramatic effect.
And on the back of that, Murray, just a brief point, but it's the hidden effects, I suppose, of art. You know, I've always said, and I mentioned it at the beginning of the programme, that things like drama, for example, you know, to me, drama wasn't just about standing around pretending you're a tree. It was also about literature. It was about confidence. It was about dialogue. It was about relationships with other.
There's so much more to the wider. I mean, unfortunately, you know, art. You know, we're not talking about painting and drawing. We're talking about, as you say, the wider aspects of it. And it is important. I mean, obviously, the government has insisted that schools put the emphasis on, you know, science, maths, and English, and whatever. But you can't ignore the arts. And I know that I'm not an expert on the art, but I know that KCC is working currently with. We're doing some research in collaboration with Canterbury Christchurch on proving that the relation between artistic involvement and an educational attainment.
Sure.
So
we'll be back with more from Murray and Natalie in a couple of moments' time with our next story here on BBC Radio Kent. In the meantime, let's get the latest news, weather, sport and travel. With Kate, it's 20 to 12.
The News Panel with Ian Collins on BBC Radio Kent.
To 12. Pat and Steve are here after the news at 12. We'll chat to the guys in around about 5 minutes, trying to find out what's going on. Meantime, here on the news panel, Nathalie and Murray are still with us. Murray Evans, press officer for Kent County Council. Nathalie Banaigs, who's the founder and director of Kent Creative Arts. We're going to move on to story number 4. Another one that shocked us a tad, I think we can say, this week when we discovered 2 former Foreign Secretaries, Labour's Jack Straw and the Conservative Sir Malcolm Rifkin, became caught up in a new cash for access row at Westminster. They were filmed in an undercover investigation by the Daily Telegraph and Channel 4's Dispatches programme, apparently offering to use their positions to benefit a private company in return for payment. Former Maidstone and Weald MP Anne Widdecombe told BBC Radio Kent she didn't feel they'd done anything particularly wrong.
I have a great deal of sympathy for Jack, who after all is retiring. Jack Straw, that is retiring, trying to build something when he retires. And I do have sympathy for Malcolm Rifkin, who is saying quite simply that, you know, he's not a minister. He's an MP. The time that he would deploy if he were a minister could be deployed on something else. And there's nothing wrong with MPs keeping in touch with the ways of the world.
Well, following the allegations, Sir Malcolm told the Daily Politics, the reality is that to anyone from a professional or business background earns a considerable more than I do. Are MPs paid enough? Should they be allowed to have a second job? And what's interesting, Natalie, about all of this, it might look bad, it might smell bad, it might seem very bad, but it's not illegal. No law was broken in any of this.
No, I know. Well, it's a grey area, isn't it?
It's a very grey area. Has Anne Widdecombe got a point that, you know, people do need to earn money and if they're retiring from politics?
I don't have a problem with MPs having another job in principle, but they shouldn't obviously change any policies on behalf of the company who pays them and have an interest in it. But having another job, why not? Although I would worry about their commitment to the task as an MP.
What if... I mean, we'll come to that point, Murray, in just a second again, that Natalie raises about having another job. But, you know, if you are an MP and you believe, and you're an MP with some influence, so somebody like Jack Straw, former Foreign Secretary, former Home Secretary, clearly a senior parliamentarian, and you've been through the mill and you are aware that there is a contract coming up, for example, and 4 or 5 people are going to bid for it, and you genuinely believe that there's a company that is much better than all of the others. You genuinely believe it'll be better for the country, for the taxpayer. There might be an ethical dimension that makes you realise that company. Why should you not lobby for it? And if you can pocket a few quid along the way as part and parcel of your deal, why should you not be?
But that's the point. It's the pocketing of the money. I mean, you started off that by saying if you believe that ethically it's the right thing to do, it's the right company, then you'd put a word in and say I think this, but not. But if you do it in exchange for money, you're just opening up a whole can of worms. What I'm amazed at is they actually fell for it. They chased it. It's happened several times in the past. Yeah. They've been caught out.
Patrick Mercer, the Tory MP, was recently.
If someone rings you and he says, "Oh, I'm the company secretary of BP," then you know who they are. But someone comes on and says, "I'm working for an unnamed Chinese company," and you don't know me, and you sound them out. I'm not sure I'd fall for that scam.
It's interesting though, isn't it? Because they are allowed to earn extra money, and this is a kind of. It's connected to Parliament what they're doing, so they're just utilising their right to earn an extra living.
But isn't that the point? That's the point, though. You see, I know some of them are. For example, you've got someone who is a barrister. Now, if he thinks he can be a barrister, a part-time barrister, and a part-time MP can get away with that's fine, because there's not a connection between the two. It's the connection that makes things ethically wrong, I think.
Indeed.
And I don't think of what I can see, being an MP is more than a full-time job. So that's what I don't quite. Understand how you can cope with 2 big jobs.
I know. I heard a political commentator this week who runs a smallish political website, and he says, this is just a small political website that me and a couple of others run. It's quite successful. He said, but I couldn't possibly do another job. So how you become a representative of 100,000 people and all the other bits and pieces that go on in Parliament and do another job is quite extraordinary.
I've known umpteen MPs who, in my opinion, have done what appear to be a full-time job representing their constituency, and they find ways that if they're doing the job properly, it will take up the whole week, as far as I can see. The holidays are long, but that's not the same thing.
Anne Widdecombe went on to have another job, of course, on Strictly Come Dancing, where she danced and provided...
I don't think she got that by having... Well, I suppose she got it by having been an MP, but there's a strict connection.
Yes, but the way she changed the social strata of the genre of dance, I think, was probably worth its weight in gold, almost literally. OK, we are going to take some more music, after which Pat and Steve are going to be with us. We'll chat more to Nathalie and Murray as well. It's BBC Radio Kent, 10 to 12.
On the menu after midday today.
Well, when it comes to memorable, you've got to be your 5-piece bucket from the Colonel, hasn't it?
Oh, you can't beat that, can you?
Secret really herbs and spices.
Can't really knock one of those. Pat and Steve are coming up after the news at 12 o'clock here on BBC Radio Kent. Our news panel continues. One more story that we'd like to get in just before the news as well. A big week, of course, for entertainment. The Oscars, the Brit Awards, both taking place. Among the most talked about moments were Madonna falling off a stage mid-performance at the Brits, and the British actor Eddie Redmayne winning the Best Actor Oscar.
I don't think I'm capable of articulating quite how I feel right now, but please know this. I am fully aware that I am a lucky, lucky man. This Oscar...
If you weren't a fan of the film, then you would probably say, yes, you're a very lucky man indeed. Nathalie and Murray, Nathalie, first of all, are they important awards, do you think? We're talking about the arts here this morning. Are they significant, or is it just a puff piece for the egos of people whose egos are already out of control?
Well, it probably goes beyond the individuals. In that occasion, I think it shows the excellence of the UK in the creative industries, because they did well last year at the Oscars as well. Yeah. So I think it's about national identity as well in terms of creativity.
And of course, the British film industry is a pretty powerful element of film in terms of. Even when you see a film that isn't necessarily starring a British actor, you usually find that crew-wise and what's behind it, and many of the creative and artistic people, and a Bond movie is a typical example, made in this country with British talent, but usually funded by an American backer or whatever. But Murray, do you see the significance of Brits doing well? The Brit Awards, the Brits at the Oscars. It was very much a Brit week.
Yeah, I see more significance in Brits winning the Oscars. I generally speaking, would root for a Brit at the Oscars, whether I've seen the film or not. I was rooting originally for Benedict Cumberbatch. And then I saw Eddie Redmayne on the Graham Norton show. I thought, yeah, I quite like him as well. So I wanted one of those two to win, just because they're British, I think. The Brits, I think, is, if you want to get onto that as well,
Yes.
I don't think they're worth quite the same in the sense of, I mean, I think you get quizzes about Oscar winners from years gone by and, all these various categories and what have you, and people do remember them and they're Oscar, and it counts for something. The Brits, 2 years down the line, no one remember who's done it. I think the live performances are good.
Sure.
But the actual winning the awards...
There's something strange about the Oscars, though. The Oscars are often accused, and I say this kindly and I hope intelligently, they're often accused that, if you play a part that has controversy around it in some shape or form, then that almost comes ahead of your acting. So in this case, he's playing Stephen Hawking, and that is clearly a challenging role for an actor. And there is an accusation that if you want to win an Oscar, if you play a political figure who's controversial, if you play somebody with a disability, if you play somebody who has a historic significance, then the person you're playing will kind of win it for you as distinct from your acting ability. That's probably a bit unfair because Eddie Redmayne is clearly rather wonderful in this film. So.
It's a good point to make, which I hadn't considered before, so well done.
Yeah, well, thank you very much, Murray. Thank you very much. We're doing the film review later on BBC Radio again. But so they are important then in that respect, are they?
They tell the story.
They tell the story.
I'm not sure, but surely the thing about this year's Brits is going to be the Madonna incident. I mean, that's overpowered everything else, isn't it? It's not just
let's
the
have a
music.
look at that. There's an accusation today that it was all faked up. And to be honest, it's just one newspaper, but when you look at it, it looks as if she's lucky not to have broken her neck doing this. I mean, it looks like a really serious fall. In fact, I'm surprised she didn't come away.
If it was true.
It would be, wouldn't it? But it is quite profound, the way she comes down those stairs.
Exactly. And I think, to her credit, she was singing live and carried on singing. And I'd hate to think what happened if Cheryl Cole had been there and been miming on something. Do you mean on
Cheryl Cole miming? Do you
no,
mind?
I'm
I've got
sorry,
all of
just
her
a
albums,
suggestion.
Murray.
Have you, I find it hard to believe. Have you seen the lyrics to that? The song that Madonna was singing?
No, I haven't. Are they broadcastable?
No, that's right.
Are you going to sing it for us,
No,
Murray?
I don't know how it goes.
Okay.
The song's Living for Love includes the words, I fell into your arms, now I'm down on my knees, took me to heaven and let me fall down, lifted me up and watched me stumble. I mean,
Really?
I need you to lift me up. All those words are in the lyrics.
Wow, what about that? I hadn't realised
What a coincidence.
that.
Yeah.
So does that
perhaps
does that compound the conspiracy theory that maybe there was some
dear.
jiggery-pokery going on and some nice choreography? And
No, it wasn't that nice. We saw it was an act, surely.
because she's doing a big tour, even Madonna needs publicity.
You think she's going to do that on stage every night then? Now it becomes part of the act. Is that the
Well,
idea?
I mean, it's got everybody talking about Madonna again, hasn't it? So that's what artists need. And Madonna, is clearly a forceful presence in music, but I think it would be reasonable to say that she would have sold gig tickets easier 10 years ago than she would today.
That's true. Can I just point out for people that know me, I'm far too old to be interested in the Brits. I'm just
Really?
I've just been some swatting up and had to look it up just because
But-
I was coming on today.
Well,
Yeah.
you do have an interest in Madonna, hence the codes you're wearing.
Claire, do tell us who won the Brit Awards, because you can't let Madonna get the whole exposure.
That's right, yeah. Who won? Nathalie? Faye?
Hang on, Natalie's got it right.
Oh, you've got it there, sorry. Which award did you want? Did you want all of them? Oh, Ed Sheeran.
Ed
we can
Sheeran
have
got two. Yeah.
He got a couple, didn't he? Sam Smith as well.
Can I also confess that I've never heard of Royal Blood, the top group?
Have you not?
Never heard.
Oh, I've got all their albums as
No, you
well. They
haven't.
sit next to my Cheryl Cole collection. Okay. Thank you to our guests. Lots of photos from the show today, by the way, called Banaigs Theatre on our Facebook page, which is BBC Radio Kent Official. And also, where can people, Nathalie, we've only got about 10 seconds, but where can people find out more about what you've got coming up this year? Because you've got quite a lot. Is there a website people could go to?
Yes, exactly. Now, the website is kentcreativearts.co.uk, and from there are links to the group Kent Creative Live and the other project we are having. The next event, just to be very quickly, is that we will be present as the Sea Art Fair in Tunbridge Wells.
Good work. Thank you,
In
Nathalie.
June.
Thank you to Murray. This is BBC Radio Kent.